We're in Romans at the moment. So if you've got a Bible, turn to Romans chapter 2. I'm going to be reading parts on, I'm actually covering basically most of Romans 2 and 3 in one preach. Alright? So we're not doing the Martin Lloyd-Jones 17 years going through Romans, we're going a bit quicker. Yeah? So I'm kind of pulling out of these two chapters. And I kind of got a title, What's Wrong with Religion? That's my title, just to try and pull it together. But this letter that Paul wrote to the Christians in Rome started, and we talked about that a few weeks ago, started with a very bold declaration. A declaration of good news. Verse 16 of that first chapter, for I am not ashamed of the gospel. That's good news. I'm not ashamed of this good news. Because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes. First to the Jew, then to the Gentile. For in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed. A righteousness that is by faith from first to last. Just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. Now there's this bold declaration. All right? Why does Paul make a distinction between Jews and Gentiles in that? Surely it's good news for all the world, isn't it? God so loved the world that he gave it. Yeah, it's good news for the whole world. So why does Paul separate Jew and Gentile? Gentile is just the word the Bible uses for anyone who wasn't a Jew. So all the other people. Why is he doing it? Well, I think one reason is because it's Jesus was Jewish. Jesus was Jewish. The whole story up to this point has been a story of Israelites, of Israel. Abraham being called, and then the whole family growing into this multitude, into this nation. Jesus then coming, demonstrating good news. Who to? The Jewish people. That's who he came to. He came to the Jews. It was only after his resurrection that the disciples started then taking that good news to other nations. So that's partly right, I think. But I think there's another reason why Paul, writing the letter to the Roman Christians, is talking about Jews and Gentiles. You see, Rome was a cosmopolitan city, a bit like London or Dubai, a mixing pot of all the nations coming together. So there would have been people from North Africa, there would have been people from probably Northern Europe, Asia. There would have been Romans there, wouldn't there? And there would have been Jews as well. So this mixing pot. And for quite a while, the church has started with this mix going on. But something happened in around AD 41. In AD 41, Emperor Claudius decided that all Jews had to be expelled from Rome. He kicked them all out. Now, it's not really clear why, but it's something to do with their faith. Some of the writers think actually it's because of the Christians, and he couldn't separate Christians from the Jewish kind of religion, so he said, right, all Jews, you're going out. You've got to leave the city. So for quite a while, the church meeting in Rome was just Gentiles, it was just people from other nations. And they were meeting together, and they would be in the church. Now, how do we know that happens? Well, there are writings that we can read about Roman history, but we can also read about it in Acts. Acts 18, verse 1. This is what it says. After this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he met a Jew named Aquila, and a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because Claudius had ordered all Jews to leave Rome. So the Jews had been kicked out. And the church was carrying on with people from all the other nations. But as Paul is writing his letter to Rome, to the church, the Jews had started coming back. They were starting to be allowed back into the city. And so Jewish Christians started coming back into the church. And this began to cause some tension between the groups in the church. And that's partly why Paul writes this letter, dealing with the tension between the Jewish Christians and the others, the Gentiles. They were rubbing up against each other. Now, last time I spoke on this, we were looking at the second half of chapter 1. It was really focused on the church members who came from pagan backgrounds. Paul took us on a journey down a slippery slope into a valley of sin. He showed us how creation displays the very character of God, and actually none of us have an excuse for ignoring him or rejecting him. But sadly we choose to exchange God for other things. We exchange God's glory for idols and worship other things. We exchange the truth about God for a lie. And then Paul gives a little kind of focus on sexual sin, and he says we exchange natural sexual relationships for unnatural ones. That's what we do. And therefore we face the wrath of God. His judgment is seen as he gives us over to the things that we really desire. So that part of chapter 1 was really a message to the unrighteous pagans that were in the church, who needed to know that even though they might not have had a Jewish Torah, their book, they might not have had a temple or religion, they still had creation. And creation displayed God's glory to them. They also had their inner moral compass, their conscience. So actually Paul's saying, you've got no excuse not to worship God. And as we move into chapter 2, Paul shifts his attention away from the non-Jewish Gentiles. I'm pretending here, okay? Away from the non-Jewish Gentiles, he turns his attention to the smug groups that are over here. Not really. The smug group. The ones who were listening to Phoebe as she read the letter to them, and they're cheering Paul on and saying, that's right, Paul. Those pagans, they depraved their deserved judgment. But suddenly the spotlight focuses on them, on this group, the recently returned Jews. They don't have so much the issue of being unrighteous so much as the Gentiles do, but Paul pulls no punches. Right? He hits the Jews of the church squarely on the chin. You see, they might not be unrighteous, but what Paul's saying is they can be a bit self-righteous. A bit self-righteous. Just imagine the Jewish Christians there thinking, oh, at least I'm not like those pagans. At least we don't do the things like they do, go to those temples with the prostitutes and eat all that terrible food, that unclean food. We've got the Sabbath. We've got our circumcision. We've got Moses. We've got his law. Surely we're not in the same position as them. Listen to see how Paul starts chapter 2. You, therefore, have no excuse, you who pass judgment on someone else. For whatever point you judge another, you are condemning yourself, because you who pass judgment do the same things. Paul's already shown the Gentiles are on this dark spiral, downward spiral. But if you think, you Jewish people, that leaves you on the high ground where you can point your finger at others, he's saying, think again. Think again. Every time you criticize someone, actually you're condemning yourself. You see, Romans 2, what it's doing, it's pulling the rug, right? It's pulling the rug from underneath anyone who thinks their good morality, their religious commitments, their pious attitudes, their self-righteousness can save them. That's what he's doing. Verse 12 gives us kind of a good summary of it. He says, all who sin apart from the law, that's the Gentiles, they didn't have a law, did they? They didn't have the law. So those that sin apart from the law will also perish apart from the law. And all who sin under the law, that's the Jews, they're going to be judged by the law. At this early point in Paul's letter, he wants us all to realise we can't save ourselves. We can't save ourselves. Our nature is corrupt, and whether we think we can save ourselves through good moral choices, I'm going to be good enough, aren't I? Or through following laws set down by religion, we can't. Rather than just trying harder, I just try harder to keep all these laws. Or blaming perhaps society and blaming those around us, or judging others. What we actually need to do is acknowledge our own mess. Just as someone who attends an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting might start with, "Hi, I'm Martin, I'm an alcoholic." Right? Before I was found by Jesus, Martin was without hope. I was without God. I was a sinner. Whether I lived an immoral life, or whether I lived a morally self-righteous life, which is actually probably more I was doing, personally, or whether I was living a religious life, I was broken. I was broken. And even if I tried, and I did try, with all my power, and all my might, and all my intellect, I tried to keep law. That's what I tried to do. Kind of the 10 Commandments, but other things added in. Don't drink alcohol, don't smoke, don't have sex, don't do this, don't do that. That's what I grew up with. So it became law for me. But you know what? I'd fail. I'd fail. So if I'm going to fail, and you're going to fail, keeping those 10 Commandments or whatever other rules you put on yourself, why have we got them in the first place? Why have we got them? I'm just going to give you 4 reasons. There are quite a few, but 4 reasons. One, do you know the law that we have as we read those first few books of the Bible, they give us the character of God. They reveal to Israel what God is like. So that's why we've got the law. Another reason, it also enabled Israel to be set apart from all the other nations around them. They were different. They were set apart, and the law helped set them apart. But a really important thing for us to understand, third one, do you know what? The law reveals the sinfulness of humanity. Although the law was good and holy, it didn't provide salvation for the nation of Israel. No one will be declared righteous in God's sight by the works of the law. That's later on in Romans chapter 7. Rather, through the law, we become conscious of our sin. That's what the law does. It sets up, here we go, this is the template, this is the standard. I don't get there. I miss it. Fourth reason, it reveals to all of us that none of us can actually keep this law. Everyone falls short of God's standard of holiness. And you know, when we grasp it, right, when we grasp that, it causes us then to rely completely on God's mercy. To rely on His grace for salvation, not on our own efforts. And rather being like the Jews and go, you terrible people, look at me and my moral, pedestal. Actually, Paul said, no, you're not. No, you're not. You need the salvation that Jesus offers just as much. See, when Jesus came, fully human, fully God, He was and will be forever the only one to actually fulfill the law. And with His death, He paid the penalty for our breaking it. So by faith in Him, we can have that very righteousness of Christ given to us. Do you know, for some of us today, I think there's a question we need to answer. Are you trusting in yourself? Am I trusting in myself? Are we trusting in ourselves to do good enough to save ourselves? Or have we made a choice to accept Jesus as our Saviour? Realising that He has fulfilled all the commandments, all of the time, for all of us. and even paying the penalty for breaking them. You see, choice is yours. It's yours. All of us fall short. All of us miss the target. None of us can escape God's judgment. So when Paul's talking to the Jews, he goes on in chapter 3, verse 9, he says this: what shall we conclude then? Do we have any advantage? What he's saying is, are the Jews any better off? That's what he's saying to them. No. No. Not at all, for we have already made the charge that Jews and Gentiles alike are all under the power of sin. Paul shows us that the whole world is without excuse before God, because creation displays this truth. But we suppress it. We disobey it. Even those that had revelation, special revelation in the Torah, in the Jewish Bible, they had special revelation. Even those people who passed judgment on the immoral pagans, they're in the same trouble. They're in the same trouble. Verse 10, as it is written, there is no one righteous, not even one. There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks God. All have turned away. They've together become worthless. There is no one who does good, not even one. You see, Paul is making it really clear to the church in Rome and to us. Our original state is that we are all under this power of sin. And chapter 1, it showed that the Gentiles were lost. And now verse 19, Paul, as if he's in a court. Can you imagine a court? He's in a court, right? And there's a court case going on. And it's coming to the end. And Paul, in verse 19 here, right, he's kind of finishing the prosecution. He says this: now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be silenced and the whole world held accountable to God. In Rome, when you went to a court and you were like a witness, or perhaps you've been accused of a crime and you were giving evidence, apparently what would happen is when you came to the end of giving all your evidence, you had nothing more to say, you did this. It was a sign to say, I've got no more. I've got nothing else to bring. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God's judgment. Whether you're an unrighteous person exchanging the truth of God for a lie, or you're a self-righteous, morally righteous, religious type, Paul in these first 3 chapters of his letter brings us all before the judge. And there is no more you or I can say to defend ourselves. We're guilty. If you personally think, I've got it all sorted, I can do it in my own strength, through my own moral living, I would just say to you, read chapters 1 to 3 again. Read them again. Check it out. Because it's only when we recognise the need to be silent, give up, that we can then move on. It's only when we recognise we are guilty, we are ready to hear and receive then good news. You see, it's like a doctor. Paul's a bit like a doctor here. You know, when a doctor, you go to see the doctor and they have to give an honest diagnosis of what's wrong with you. And it can be painful to hear, can't it, sometimes? It can be horrible to hear sometimes. But what Paul's doing is that. He's giving a diagnosis, saying this is the state we're in. This is the state we're in. Why is he doing it? Because he wants to then point us in the direction of restoration. He wants to point us towards spiritual health. And you know, he doesn't waste any time. He doesn't waste any time. Straight after saying this judgment, all have sinned. All fall short of the glory of God. Paul then goes straight on to say this: all are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came by Jesus Christ. That's all right, Paul, you can read it to us. That's all right. It's just reading the Bible verse for us. There you go. It's not even doing that. Someone help her out. You're trying to do that. There we go. Well done. So, that's every Monday night at Life Group. If you want to be entertained, come to our Life Group. That's what happens every week. But hey, we have fun with it. You see, so he's saying all the sin, all are justified. God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of his blood to be received by faith. See, when we make an assessment of ourselves, do you know, we're all down here. We really are. Near the bottom of the floor. The target, way up there. Way up there. We've all fallen short. But because of God's grace, because of his love, his mercy, we can be redeemed. That fine that I deserve to pay, the sentence that I've been received from the court, it's all been paid by Jesus. Isn't it amazing? You see, it wasn't just a parking fine. It wasn't that kind of fine. Actually, it required death. That's the kind of fine it was. It was a death sentence. Jesus left heaven and came to take on the punishment of each of us. There were these two girls growing up, and they went to nursery together. They became best friends. They went to school, primary school together, even secondary school, and they were inseparable. Got on so well. It's amazing. Best of friends. But gradually, as time went on, they started to drift apart. One went off to university, one got a job, and life was very different for these two girls. Many years later, they met again in a courtroom with a white wig and a red robe. One of them was the judge. In the dock was the other girl. Got caught up in a load of mess. Caught with possession of drugs and doing terrible stuff, and was there in the court. And the court case went on, and the judge is looking at her dear friend that she hasn't seen for many, many years. And the judge has to be just, doesn't it? She has to be just. She can't go, oh, it's all right, don't worry, you're my friend, I can let you off. She has to go through the process. And so, yeah, she's guilty, she's found guilty, and the fine is given. The fine is given. This girl has no way of paying this fine. No way. Judge takes off her wig, takes off her cloak, steps down from that platform, comes down next to her friend, and gives her the cash to pay the fine. Gives her the cash to pay the fine. Jesus came down from heaven. That's what we're going to be celebrating over Christmas, isn't it? God with us. To pay the fine. So what does it say? All are justified freely. Okay, well, it's okay then, isn't it? We're all saved. What's the problem then? What's all the fuss about? We've all sinned. Okay, yeah, we got that. But we're all going to be justified. Actually, to look at the end of the verse. To be received by faith. To be received by faith. You see, the judge came off her seat, came off the platform, took the wig off, took the robe off, came down, gave the cash. But her friend, right, her friend had to take the cash, receive it. She had to receive it. That this was really on offer. And when she received the cash, she could then pay the fine. It's only through faith in Christ Jesus that we receive the payment of that fine that we all deserve. That's what Paul is talking about, the good news. That's what he's saying. Through faith in Jesus, you can receive redemption from the fine. You can be justified. Alright, the way I think about it is that just as if I had never sinned. That's how I remember it. That's what justified is. It's just as if I'd never done it. It's amazing, isn't it? Isn't that just appalling, actually, that God would do that? No. Isn't it amazing that God would do that? He would wipe it all clean. You know, you might look at society today and conclude we're on a downward spiral of decay and of destruction. And as you look at the world. You might have that kind of view. But I just want to say to you, Paul was writing to a very similar culture and situation in Rome at that time. Very similar. And what's he remind them? And what does he remind us today? That the power of the gospel for the salvation, right? The power of the gospel for salvation is still as powerful today as it was when Jesus rose from the dead. It's the same power. It's no different. We don't need to take a pessimistic, down spiral look at what's going on around us at this time. We don't need to lament the state of our world. Because the gospel is the power of God for the salvation. Alright? It's the power of God. In fact, it's when culture gets darker. When culture gets darker, the gospel shines more brightly. What earrings have you got on today? Oh no, they're not the same ones. Tanya's got into jewellery repairing. So any broken jewellery, bring it Tanya's way. She's having a go. She's got some tools and she did some earrings for Pauline. But I don't know if you ever noticed, guys, if you ever have to go and buy an engagement ring, and you're choosing the ring, and do you notice that when the jeweller gets the ring out, before they show you the ring, they lay a black cloth out on the counter. They lay a black cloth on the counter first. Now, I'm going to turn the lights out. Why do they do that? Well, because it's then when they lay the ring, it shines far more brightly, doesn't it? It shines far more brightly. It's the same with the sky. You know, the stars are up there. Do you know the stars are there now? Did you know that? Did you know that? You can't see them though, can you? When can you see them? When it's dark, yeah. When it's dark. Romans chapter 1 to 3. Apart from that first little bit at the beginning, what Paul has done is set out the dark backdrop. Alright, the dark backdrop of how the state of the world is. For both Jewish people with all their religion, circumcision and Sabbath, that wasn't going to save them. And for pagans, Gentiles like us, many of us, we are all unrighteous. We are all in need of a Saviour. And once he's spread out his black cloth in chapters 1 to 3, it's now the time to get the diamond and to bring it and place it on the cloth. It's now time to say, here is the gospel. Here is the good news to declare. And we can then see it sparkle and declare and just be amazed at what Christ has really done for us. And to hear that, you've got to come back in January 2024. Because we're going to do Christmas now. Alright? That's when we pick up. When we go into the next bit, we'll see. It's been a bit, hasn't it? Alright? It's been a bit, is it really like that? But you know what? He's setting the scene. He's letting us know where we're at. And now he's going to go, whoa, here it is. And we're going to marvel at what God has done for us. It's just amazing. We're going to close with singing and say, no, I can't actually have it. But I just want to say the key little message in this, all right? What's wrong with religion? If you think religion will save you, it's Christ. If you think following a set of laws and always doing the right thing, it's Christ that saves you. If you think actually being morally good outweighs the bad, people talk about, don't they, there's balance. Oh yeah, okay, I've done some right, but yeah. Well, not like them. I'll compare. That's how he starts chapter 2 straight off, isn't it? Oh, you think they're bad? Well, it's just the same. If we try and do a comparison of scales and go, well, I've got a little bit bad, all my good stuff on this side, I'll be okay. Oh, I'll be right. Paul's saying no. All about him. It's all about him. And when we realise how black it is, how evil sin is, that we then turn to him and go, I can do nothing. I come under your grace and your mercy. Let's sing.